I'm just checking a couple of things and we will see if everything is working. I am going live with a very special broadcast, so give me a couple seconds here and making sure it's all working. And then I'm going to hit live. I'm going to hit the broadcast. So here we go. Let's see. Looks like we are good to go. So, ladies and gentlemen, with no further ado, a very special broadcast for you that I think you're really going to like. So here it goes. Hello, this is Pastor Karl, creator of Kidology.org and host of KidminTalk.com, where my goal is always to equip and encourage you in your children's ministry. Today, I'm excited to welcome you to a very special video edition of Kidmin Talk. That means it's also available on YouTube and my other video platforms, in addition to where you normally listen to it. Because today, I'm privileged to share with you a very special opportunity I got to spend a few minutes with Dallas Jenkins. Now, you may know him as the creator of The Chosen, but our topic today was his brand new family Christmas movie that's coming out in just a few weeks, The Best Christmas Pageant Ever. And of course, we talked about the movie, but we also talked about children's ministry. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this very special edition of the podcast as Dallas Jenkins and I talked Kidmin. You're going to love it. Hey, Dallas, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on, Karl. I appreciate it.
Hey, what an honor. Hey, man, my audience is children's ministry leaders, and many of them were called to ministry as kids. It's obvious from what I've seen of your work, you have a heart for kids and families. And before we dive into the pageant, hey, since you're known so well for The Chosen and this wonderful family film, hey, before we dive into it, I'm just wondering if maybe you could give us a quick glimpse into how you got into filmmaking. You know, was it a movie or a filmmaker as a kid? Were you grabbing a camera as a little boy and filming stuff, or what got you into this?
Yeah, I wish that I would have gotten started earlier as a kid, but I was into sports and a Bible school, and I thought maybe I wanted to be a sports broadcaster. And also growing up in a conservative Christian home, back in the 80s and whatnot, you were not encouraged to do filmmaking, right? It was just not something like it is today where you could consider it a mission field or consider it something that was a normal endeavor. And I was also protected in a good way from like a lot of movies and TV show. So, but then when I got to high school, my dad was like, all right, you're old enough now. I want to start introducing you to some great films, classic films. My dad's a movie buff, also a great storyteller. And I remember when I watched the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest with Jack Nicholson, movie from the mid 70s. Yeah. And I remember watching that movie on a Saturday afternoon. And I remember thinking, I was so moved and so inspired. I thought, whatever that is, I want to do that. That's a movie, like I want to arouse in audiences the kind of emotional reaction that I'm having right now. And so that's when I shifted and started grabbing a video camera and started trying to tell more visual stories. And it wasn't until I graduated from college and the Left Behind books, which my dad wrote, became this phenomenon, and they were going to be made into movies. And so I got a job in that project. And then when they were about to make that movie, I ended up going out on my own, and my dad and I started our own thing. But that was the genesis of being interested in visual storytelling.
Oh, that's fantastic. I didn't know that about your dad. Well, obviously, The Chosen has established you as a fantastic, insightful writer and director, but as one whose world revolves around ministry to and for kids. I don't know if I'm an outlier on observing your knack for directing kids, but I have to say one of my favorite episodes of The Chosen is way back in season 1. And yes, they get better and better. But that, I think it was the 3rd episode where Jesus' first little band of followers, where I can't say Jesus practiced. He doesn't need practice, but it seemed that way to me. Like he had this little band of kids and he taught them, and they came out to see him every day. And he said, I came not for the rich, but also for the poor. And now in the pageant, again, you're focusing on these poor kids.
Yeah.
Am I wrong that this kind of shows that you have a heart for kids? I mean, you could have waited till that classic story of, the disciples arguing about theology and Jesus saying, "Hey, chewing out the disciples,
Right.
and you'll bring the kids unto me." But you brought the kids into it right in episode 1. That's completely optional. And so I just wonder what led you to include them so early in The Chosen, and now to retell this beautiful story in a fresh way. It just makes me think you've got a love for kids.
I do, and it's a good question. I would say that one of the things that I love about it is less about kids specifically. Although I have 4 kids of my own, I love kids. I've done youth ministry. I've worked in. I've done a lot of volunteering and special needs ministry. So I'm able to do it, and I'm able to run a set where kids are free to kind of play, but also work hard and have some discipline. But it's more about the unique perspective. I love telling the Jesus story or any Bible story from a fresh perspective. And this is what your job is, Karl, is these kids and adults too, but have heard these stories many times. And there's no way that a 6-year-old, an 8-year-old or whatever is going to read the Bible and completely understand it and completely make sense of it and apply it to their lives. It's just not possible. And so you might be thinking, well, that's a negative. That's a bummer. And when they get older, they'll understand it better. And yet here's what's funny. Jesus says, no, 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 no. You
Amen.
who are older, I actually want you to have the faith of a child. And
Amen.
we can unpack that. We could do a whole episode about what faith of a child means, but
Let's do it.
having this unique perspective and these questions that they ask. And I think you'll see, if you've seen that episode that you're talking about, season 1, episode 3, and if you've seen the best Christmas pageant ever, the crossover is there's scenes where kids are sitting there in a group and there's someone up front in front of them answering questions. In The Chosen, it's Jesus. In the best Christmas pageant ever, it's a children's ministry worker. And they're peppering her with all these questions. And she's like, oh my goodness, I don't know. I haven't even thought of the answers to these questions. Well, the through line is children have this unique perspective. They're very curious. And if they hear something that doesn't make sense to them, they don't stop. They keep going.
Yeah, and we could do a whole episode on that. And I love that Jesus says, adults lose some of that, and that's why we need to come as children. Hey, what's it like directing kids? Any advice for us that literally direct them every Sunday?
Well, I learned from people like you. It's I think that there's something about that combination of appreciating what kids bring to the table while also recognizing they need discipline, they need boundaries. They actually appreciate that. They don't know it, but I'm definitely the fun guy. I show up. I'm not at your level, but like I show up on set. These kids feel safe. They feel cared for. I'm going to make them laugh. I'm going to entertain them. But then there's times when it's time to work and it's time to listen and it's time to obey. And I think being willing to do that and recognizing that, I'm never going to be harsh or abusive. I'm never going to hurt anybody emotionally or physically. But when kids know that there are boundaries and they know that there is a line that they could cross that's going to make me displeased with them and that there will be consequences, they actually feel safer. I always liken it to this, and I think this is something you can use or other ministry leaders can use. As I say, sometimes kids might think they want no boundaries, right? They want total freedom. And I liken it to a block of ice out in the middle of the ocean. So let's say there's a block of ice in the middle of the ocean. There's a bunch of sharks circling around it. And you're going to ice skate on that block of ice. How confident are you in doing flips and turns and trying things and taking a risk? How much freedom do you feel like you're going to have if you're on a block of ice with no wall? You're actually going to be somewhat limited. You're actually going to limit yourself a little bit because you know that if you fall and if you go outside of this block of ice, you're going to fall into the ocean and you might get attacked by sharks or frozen to death. It's putting up a wall on that block of ice that actually makes you feel more free. You know that you can take a chance and you might fall, but you're going to be blocked by this wall. You know that you can try new things. You can really go for that triple Lutz or whatever they call it, because you know that at the end of the day, yes, I have a little bit of restriction, but those restrictions are going to prevent me and actually give me more freedom than if there weren't any. Now, kids don't fully understand that, and sometimes we as adults don't fully understand that, but I think that's a good way to think of it. I'm going to let you fall down. I'm not going to protect you from everything. And sometimes that's harder for moms to practice than it is for dads, but we're going to let you fall down. We're going to let you even hurt yourself. But there is a wall here that's going to prevent you from falling off the edge.
That's awesome. And I think one of probably the key things you said is they need direction, and maybe even being a director is something
Yes.
we can carry into kids ministry. It's your title, but in kids ministry, directing is something we need to really do. We
Yeah.
use leader a lot, but
Yeah.
directing sometimes might be a better word.
Absolutely. That's a good word.
We won't take a lot of time on it, but I am going to link in the show notes. I love the video that you and Amanda shared. I think it's like 13, 14 months ago now, of
Yeah.
when you announced that you got the rights to the story. And it really encouraged me. And I just wanted to thank you for it, because you really believed God wanted you to do this. You started praying. I can't remember if it was every day or once a week for the rights to this movie. And it came and went. In fact, finally, it looked like the door was closed, and
Yeah.
yet you didn't stop praying. Can you just speak briefly to just why you continued to pray even when the door looked closed? What
Yeah.
compelled you to not give up that hope? And now here the movie is completed and coming out on theaters November
Yeah.
8th.
Yeah.
What
That's
does
great.
that feel like?
Yeah. My wife brought the book home, The Best Christmas Pageant Ever. This is a book that's been read in public schools for decades. It's popular among believers and non-believers, which is really interesting because it's very much a Jesus story. And it is a love letter to volunteers. I mean, it's a love letter to what you do. I mean, I remember, I think I even sent this message to you, but I was like, I don't know that there's a better ministry that this movie is for than people who are in kids ministry, because it's a love letter to moms in particular, but also dads, but people who volunteer, who do work with kids, and who come across people like the Herdmans. So my wife brought the book home, and I'm reading it to my kids. This is almost 20 years ago. And I was laughing. I was crying. In fact, the last chapter, I couldn't even get through it. I was crying so hard. My kids were confused about why Dad's crying so hard. And Amanda would take the book to read some of it, then she'd start crying. I closed the book and I said, I have to make this movie. Now, look, not every time that we feel called by God to do something does it actually work out. Sometimes we were wrong. Sometimes God wasn't calling us to it. Sometimes it's our own brain. Sometimes it's our own heart. Sometimes God calls us to something, and for that period of time, but not forever, right? And so I can't promise that every time you have this strong feeling that it means exactly what you think it means. But I know
Amen.
that I know that I know that when I finished that book, I was like, I am the only one to make this movie. There's so many reasons for that, from the story to the heart to the humor to my work with kids, but I just felt like I got it. And yet for 15 years pursuing it over and over again, I kept being told no. And now, of course, looking back on it, I know that God was preparing it for me too. I wasn't fully ready to do it and wasn't fully qualified yet to do it. But finally, I did. A few years into it, I put a calendar reminder in my phone and in my computer, and it just said, pray for pageant. So every week it would pop up, pray for pageant. And I would pray. And of course, I'd try to pray for God's will to be done regardless of my involvement. But I was really praying. I'm like, God, I believe that you called me to this. And if it's not supposed to happen, make it obvious. But if it is, do it. And he never made it obvious that I wasn't supposed to do it. In fact, when I was told no for what I thought was the last time a few years ago, I went to my wife and I said, they told me no, they're going to go with a different person in a different studio. And we were so upset. And I went back to my office. I sat down, and popped up on my computer was pray for pageant. And it was taunting me. And I went to delete it. And I said, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep getting my hopes up. I can't keep putting myself out there. And I don't know if you're seeing me on video, but I reached for the mouse and I started to click it to go delete it. And I just felt the God on my heart. Not yet. Don't do that. Now, I don't always hear from the Lord that directly, but it was just very clear, like, not yet. So I decided not to delete it. I decided to pray. It was a sad prayer. I was like, all right, fine, God, whatever. If you want it to be your will, and blah, blah, blah. But I did it. And then Amanda walks into my office and she goes, my wife, she says, you know what? I was praying and I was frustrated. And I just felt like God was saying, not yet, just wait. This isn't over. And I'm like, oh man, don't tell me that, because I'm going to get my hopes up again. Well, sure enough, and we'll wrap this up here, but just a couple years ago, I reached out to the rights holders again, sent them a text. I said, hey, I'm checking in, just want to keep bugging you. And he said, oh, that's funny. He goes, a week ago, the studio forgot to extend the rights. And now we have the rights back. And we've been a little frustrated. He said, just a couple of days ago, my mom called me and said, have you seen a show called The Chosen? And I said, no, I haven't seen it yet. He goes, yeah, I haven't seen it yet, but the creator of the show is always bugging me to do Best Christmas Pageant Ever. And this 75-year-old woman said, "You better give him the rights. He's the only one who can make this movie. What are you thinking? Are you kidding me? He's perfect for this." And he's like, "So I watched the show. Let's talk." And finally, as I'm talking to you right now, I don't know if I would call it a dream come true, but I would call it a calling fulfilled, where
Amen.
I get a chance to show this movie to the world. This conversation we're having right now is in many ways a miracle and something that I really, really prayed and hoped would happen. So yeah, sometimes God does put a calling on your heart that you can't shake, that you know that it's what you're supposed to be doing. And sometimes it takes a long time. But sometimes that's why what he wants. He wants you to be
Thanks
patient.
for sharing that, because it really blessed me to not give up, to keep on praying. And I appreciate your caveat that, it has to be of God, and that sometimes God does say no, but never to give up praying. And part of that prayer is, God, I'm willing, I hold it with open hands.
Yeah, right.
But I'm not going to let go of it until you clearly tell me no. Well, just two more questions. The last one's a quick one, but obviously I want to give you the close to answer the obvious question of, what is the message that you're hoping families will take away from this film? Obviously, what I'm sharing with people is I'm constantly promoting this and telling people about it. And what I say is that, what I took away from it is that Christmas is not for Christians. It's for people who need Jesus, those who don't already come to church, who don't already know all their traditions, who don't take it for granted. It's for the herdmans, it's for the kids and adults, who don't know that. And, you've already mentioned, and I was going to bring it up, that, you guys cried when you read the book. So I think for you, it's deeper, and it's more than just that simple message. So I want to give you a chance in your words just to say, beyond that obvious message that we walked out, or people will walk out of the theater. I was in my living room watching that early screening, but when people walk out of there, what do you want them to take away from that, and why then should they take people to see this and not just their Christian friends?
Yeah. Well, the final words of the movie that are said by Lauren Graham, who's this great actress from Gilmore Girls and Parenthood, they're also the final words of the book. And it's, "Unto you a child is born." And that phrase is the gospel. That is Emmanuel, God with us. And it's not just for the already believers. It's unto you. God came here for you, everyone. He wants a personal relationship with you. God became man. And unto you a child is born. And there's also that great word, a child. God came as a baby. He came as a vulnerable, in poverty, outcast human. And I think that as non-Christians who've been reading this book, and some who haven't read the book, but this book has been read in public schools for years. It doesn't feel like a churchy movie, even though it's set in a church. It doesn't feel like you're doing homework. So this is the perfect movie for you to say to your friends, "Hey, come check out this Christmas film. It's coming out from a major Hollywood studio. It's in every theater in the country. It's not like a church movie that you have to feel like you're doing homework to watch. It feels like a normal movie, and yet it ends with and throughout has this message of what the true meaning of Christmas is, that unto you a child is born. And the song, the Blake Shelton, one of the great artists of in our country right now, closes the movie singing, "Go tell it on the mountain that Jesus Christ is born." So it's rare to have a movie like that explicit in theaters being treated like a normal movie. And so that's what I hope people take away, is unto you a child is born.
Yeah, my favorite scene of the movie is the kids in the library.
Yeah.
And the librarian is nervous because she thinks they're in there for no good.
Right.
They're researching the Christmas story. And that's all I'm going to say about that, because I don't want to spoil too much of it. But that moved me to tears, among other scenes. So you'll laugh, folks. You'll cry. You'll be challenged. You'll be touched. Thank you, Dallas, for, and your whole team, for all the hard work that went into putting this together. I hope that God blesses it. I know it's going to touch lives. So last question, super controversial, to eggnog or not to eggnog?
Eggnog. Only in
Eggnog.
December. Only in December, but yes, eggnog.
Yes, good. All right. Well, I'm glad you're an eggnogger just like me. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule to just say an encouraging word to children's ministry workers who are in the trenches and ministering to herdman kids week in and week out. And we appreciate everything that you're doing. And we will be taking folks to see the film. Opens on November 8th. And we can't wait to see what God calls you to next.
Thank you so much, Karl. It was great to talk to you.
All right. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed watching or listening to that as much as I enjoyed getting to have a few minutes with Dallas. He certainly is a gifted storyteller and should inspire us in our ministries to be creative in our teaching and to seek to tell even familiar stories in fresh and creative ways. You know that kidology.org exists to equip you to teach the Bible creatively and to encourage you along the way as you face challenges. Be sure you not only go see the best Christmas pageant ever, but invite others as well, and not just your Christian friends, because remember, Christmas isn't just for them. Until next time, keep reaching and teaching kids for Jesus, and all kids, even the herdmans. Scratch that, especially the herdmans. Until next time, see you later.